the beginning of 2021, my friends, we had guests on where we started to talk about what are the things that we really want from our life. Not necessarily goals, but what are the visions? What is the progress that we want to make? What do we want to see or vision our life like? And it's halfway through the year. And I thought, what a great way for us to touch base on those visions. Maybe we're feeling a little bit frustrated. Maybe there are some obstacles that have come our way. Maybe we aren't necessarily trusting ourselves with moving in the directions that we might have. Maybe it's because of a life transition that we are experiencing that was unexpected or even a bit expected, but maybe not right now. So that being said, I have someone for you to listen to today who will literally light your soul on fire. Her name is Mindy Henderson, and Mindy has an amazing story about overcoming obstacles, being in those moments where you are not the one that everyone is clinging to, where you feel left out. How do you move forward from those things? And how do you find that passion within that really lights your soul on fire and finds the direction to move you into a space where you are not only making impact in your life, but the lives around you? Mindy is a motivational speaker, she is a podcaster, and she is a wonderful woman who utilizes a wheelchair every single day of her life to get around. So if you don't think that Mindy has seen some obstacles in her life, you got another thing coming. This woman is going to be sunshine in your point of life that might not feel as motivating right now. So tune in and listen to this newest episode of the Thrive Forward podcast. Hi, Mindy.
Hello.
Thank you so much for joining the Thrive Forward podcast.
Oh, stop it. Thank you for having me. I've been so looking forward to this.
I know. Mindy and I get to spend every Wednesday together from noon until 1 o'clock Central Time. And I met Mindy via her community that she has started with our friend Shannon, spelled a little differently than mine, but still pretty rad and cool.
Exactly.
But we got to meet, and they've gathered a bunch of really awesome women together and created a wonderful community. But today I wanted to focus on you and your story and what an inspiration you are.
Well, thank you. That's very sweet of you to say. You know, you kind of go through life, you live your life, and you don't think much about, what you're doing or, until, unless you're intentionally, working a career or have a specific mission to try to impact people. I think that's the power of stories, is that, we're all just kind of living life and doing our thing and not realizing maybe how we're impacting other people along the way. So thank you.
Well, you have a calming spirit, and you have such an ability to empower people every day. So I am really excited for our listeners to get to know a little bit more about you.
I'm excited too.
So start from the very beginning. How do we, how do we start? But from the beginning, share with our audience a little bit about your story and how you've gotten to the place that you are now today, speaking and inspiring and sharing your story in hopes to touch the lives of others.
Yeah, so it's been a very long, windy road. Really at the heart of my story is my disability. And so I was diagnosed with a neuromuscular condition called spinal muscular atrophy, type 2. There are 3 types, but I was diagnosed when I was only 15 months old. And so I started to, walk and stand and do all of the things that babies normally do at that age. And then I stopped. And it was clear to my parents that something was going on. They took me to the pediatrician, who said that I was fine, and it was probably just a phase I was going through and just to let it ride. But my parents, any parents who are listening, you've got that mom gut and the dad gut, and if something's wrong. And so we embarked on, I like to call it my medical scavenger hunt, that actually led us to Minnesota, where I was ultimately diagnosed at the Mayo Clinic by the head of neurology with this condition, spinal muscular atrophy. And this was, I'm not going to tell you how many years ago, but it was, quite a while back. And there was a lot less known about my condition back then. And my parents, who were only in their 20s when this happened, they had I have an older sister. She was, I think, younger than 3. And now me, and they found themselves having to navigate this complicated medical situation and advocate for me and help me. And I will just say that I'm lucky to have the parents that I did, because they were told that I would, in fact, continue to lose all of my ability to stand and walk, that I would lose all of my cognitive function, and that I probably would not live to be 3. And so, I always try to put myself in their place. And, I didn't even have my daughter until I was in my almost mid 30s, and I can't imagine having to navigate what they did at the age that they were, and with the information that they were given. But they decided between the two of them that, if this was how the story was going to end, they wanted to know that they had done everything humanly possible for me. And so they talked to some of the doctors and the specialists, and everybody agreed that, well, it couldn't hurt to try physical therapy. And so my dad, who had been a pretty serious athlete, he was scouted by the NFL, knew a thing or two about exercise, injuries, and physical therapy. So he started to work with me, and bit by bit, it was subtle, but I did start to improve. And then I had a 3rd birthday and a lot more birthdays. And clearly I'm sitting here talking to you. And despite life in a wheelchair, as I like to put it, all of their other predictions for me were proven to be untrue. And so, my parents, I like to tell this story because, even though I was so young, and it's not a story that I really remember, it's a story that I've always, always known. I don't remember a time when I didn't know this story. And in that process, my parents really became my first examples of having hope in the face of what was, according to the experts, a pretty hopeless situation. And so I think that, that was one of the things really early in my life that set the tone for my life. I went on after that to have the honor of representing the Muscular Dystrophy Association as, they call them Goodwill ambassadors now, but back then they were poster children. And I represented them for the state of Texas and then the state of Florida. And I got a lot of really cool opportunities. I actually gave my first speech when I was 4, and got the speaking bug and learned, I think at a really young age, how to turn something negative into a positive, how to kind of impact people, like we were saying, with your stories and the importance of storytelling. And that just became such a saving grace in my life, because, at the same time that I was doing that, I was growing up being bullied and being made fun of. And, there was this alternate life in my personal life where being disabled was so hard. And yet I had this silver lining that was teaching me a lot of other lessons along the way. So, fast forward, I grew up in a family that had the same expectations for me as my able-bodied sister. I was expected to do well in school, to go to college, to have friends, have interests. And I went on to college. I had a 20-year career in high tech. And then about 3 years ago, I pivoted and I started what I'm calling my passion career. And I work now as a motivational speaker, a writer, a coach, a podcast host. And I wake up every single day doing what I absolutely love. And I do advocacy work for the disabled community. It's really turned out to be a life that I'm honored and so proud to live.
Oh, I'm like, I'm getting just emotional listening to your
Oh,
story.
you're sweet.
Um, because I know like I talk to clients all the time about life transitions, right?
Yeah.
And how they all happen at once.
Yep.
And you just shared in your story how they hit for you as a young child, how they hit for your parents, how
Mhm.
they hit for you growing up as a child. And I think sometimes we forget how hard it is to just be a child and then be a
Yeah.
child
Under
that
the
is,
best of circumstances.
yes,
Yeah.
right. And then just to have those two alternative aspects of life too, one where you're living this superstar in this community, right? You're speaking and you're doing these things and being,
Yeah.
and then you turn around and you're like, wait, they don't see me for who I am.
Right.
And
Exactly.
I'm so grateful that you see yourself for who you are, because I wouldn't know you then if you hadn't
Oh, thank
taken
you.
that brave step out of the high tech world into the space of speaking.
Well, and
Uh,
even that, thank you. But and I wish I could take credit for that. But what I didn't tell you is that, we're talking about transitions, but I was actually laid off of my job. Like I said, I had this 20-year career in high tech, and the company that I had been working for, I had been with for, I think, almost 7 years. So, they ended up being acquired by another company. There wasn't a lot of other opportunity at the company. And so, and the team that I was managing at the time was identified as one that they wanted to rehire for overseas. And, big long story, but I moved on and, decided that I would, figure out what my next move was, my next big adventure, thinking that it was going to be in the high tech world, still, continuing on with my corporate life. And 10 months later, I was still looking for work, and it wasn't that I didn't, I had a very deep breadth and depth of experience. I'd had some
sure.
amazing opportunities along the way. I knew what I brought to the table at these companies, but for some reason, nothing was taking. And I was casting a really wide net. And one day I had a bathroom floor moment where I had, gotten a rejection from another job that I was positive I was going to get. And I didn't get it. And it had been 10 months, like I said, and my brain, I'm a fairly naturally positive person, but my brain was starting to go to some dark places. And I was really questioning myself and my abilities and my likability and, all of those things. And I stopped. And I realized in that moment, because I had started while I had the time off, I had dipped my toe back in the speaking pond and I hadn't done that in a while. And I was really enjoying it. And I said to myself, looking at myself in the mirror, it was totally cliche, but it was like, I can either become the worst version of myself right now and be this angry, bitter, frustrated person, or I can write a book about overcoming adversity while I'm sitting in this mess, and I can speak and the second that I made that decision, everything changed. And I still continued looking for a job for a while, but it wasn't going anywhere. And over on the other side, the speaking and the coaching and the podcasting and all of that other stuff, things just started to line up, and it was kind of amazing to watch. And I think that it's important to remember to pay attention to what's going on and try different things. And, if one thing's not working, try something else. And granted, this is a really extreme example of trying something else, but I think that it's an example that can ring true for anyone who may be listening, where you may be on a path to trying to make something happen, and it's so hard, and you feel like you're slamming your head against a wall and nothing is working. And sometimes if you just make even a little shift, it can be the shift that lines everything up.
Yeah. Well, and it sounds like for you, it was really what the universe and God or whoever, you believe in,
Yeah.
pushing you in the direction of too.
Yeah, I have never felt more like I am in the right place at the right time, doing exactly what I'm supposed to be doing. And it's been kind of incredible to me how that kind of gets proven to me on a daily basis. I feel really lucky.
Well, can you share with us a little bit about some of the work that you've been doing? Specifically, I would love for you to share your philosophy even on the universal design, which is something that I've just literally clung to every space I go to now. I'm like,
Yeah,
oh.
I know. I know. When you start looking for it, it's kind of amazing at how the absence of it screams at you. But before I get to that, really quickly, so first and foremost, I feel like my primary mission is really in personal development, and, disability or not. I work with people, giving speeches, doing coaching, doing my podcast, writing a book, all of these things. And my first intention is just to get people to understand that the wrong mindset is far more disabling than any wheelchair might represent, and I work with people to try to help them see potential instead of limitations. And I'm not just talking about physical limitations, financial limitations, or, you name it, there are all kinds of limitations that we can have on our lives. And so, I really want people to see in their own lives what's possible, and to stop making excuses, and just to get on with it and go for what they want, and cast fear aside and throw caution to the wind, and all of those metaphors, and just do what is going to bring them fulfillment and joy in their lives. So that's really thing number one. Thing number two is the advocacy work that I've kind of stepped into. And I'm really, really passionate about, just disability awareness in general, because I think that, there are so many groups of people in the world who are marginalized and who don't get the opportunities that other people get and have been held back for so long. And I think that the disabled community is one area where there's so much work to do. I worked, like I said, in corporate America for 20 years. I never saw another person in a wheelchair, and I know so many qualified, interesting, well-spoken, well-educated people who just can't get people to hire them for one reason or another. They're not getting the opportunities. And so I'm also, taking the opportunity with the platform that I've built to just talk about awareness and inclusion. And I think with the disabled community, there are so many people in this world who may not have a disabled person in their life. And I totally get it that if that's the case for you, you may very well not be comfortable with disability and interacting with someone who's disabled. But my whole message is give it a chance. Give yourself the opportunity to get comfortable with it. And the only way that that's going to happen is by making people in this community more prevalent in the community and give them more opportunity and all of those things. So that's thing number one. But then on a more granular level, my three kind of passion missions are universal design, which is just, it's so simple. It's the idea of building architecture in our cities, in our world, that are as available and as accessible for a person in a wheelchair as a person who's not. Things like having door sensors that sense when a person comes up to them and they just open, and you don't have to worry about if a button is at the right height and if you can reach it and those sorts of things. And the way that ramps are built and the way that doors are structured and all of those things. So universal design, honestly, well, air travel is kind of the second one. And don't get me started on how far behind the times we are on air travel for disabled people. And then the last one is fashion. I think that a lot, there are companies in the beauty industry who have done some really intentional work about showing women with different body types and, different ethnicities and all of those sorts of things. But you still don't see many people with disabilities in advertisements and, the beauty brands and those sorts of things. And that's another thing that I would really like to see change.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, all of those aspects are just the element of having a humane life where you get to be treated the same as everyone else, right?
It's true. I mean, it ultimately, it comes down to civil rights. And because you sit down all the time, or because you can't see, or because you can't hear, that doesn't mean that you're not entitled to the same human experience as anybody else. And, that's the awareness that I'm really trying to build.
And it's such a beautiful, I think you're on a movement mission.
Oh, thank you.
And I think you're leading the way in that space. And by leading the way, you create community around you. You are rather intentional about making sure to do that. And I think that it's such a wonderful part of you.
Thank you.
And you are never the person that puts yourself on a pedestal, like far from that aspect of things. Yes. But you do such a great job of bringing other people in alongside you to make this mission move more forward.
And that's what it's about. It's about all of us and creating a collective mindset around these things. It's not about one person, being the star of the show or anything like that. It's about getting people talking. And I've actually got one more project that is just about to launch today. And I'm so excited about it. I was approached by the National Muscular Dystrophy Association a month or two ago, probably about 2 months ago. They wanted to develop a podcast for their organization, for members of their community and beyond. And they asked me to host it. So I'm super excited about that because we're going to get to have such incredible conversations. We've got universal design on the docket. We will be doing an episode about that, about fashion, about employment, about insurance, so many different things. And I'm actually doing my first interview today, this afternoon. We're recording it and we'll have our official launch will be in late summer. So, that's another thing that I'm so excited about and so honored to be a part of, because, these are where the conversations and the awareness and the progress is going to happen.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, you and I have talked about this before, but when we engage in conversation is when we all get to learn from each other. If we actually have true conversation rather than, listening to respond, but listening to each other's really learned and lived experiences,
right,
and understanding that your lived experience is different than my lived experience. And that doesn't mean your lived experience is wrong. It just means it's different.
Absolutely. Yeah. Different is definitely the operative word. And, I think our differences are what make us beautiful and what make us interesting. I have a daughter, and, when she was younger and the kiss of death was being different than any other 12-year-old on the planet, that was something that I tried to impart to her, was that, embrace what's different about you, because that's what's going to make you an interesting person in this world and go on to lead an interesting life. So yeah, we've all got so much to contribute and so many different perspectives that can really make the world an incredible place.
Well, I think wrapping like this up all in like a bow and talking about that, one of the pieces that you mentioned earlier was the mindset aspect of
Yeah.
things, no matter what your ability or disability might be, right? Like
Right.
mindset is a huge piece. And you mentioned life transitions and going through those trying moments of trying to find a job and feeling like you weren't able to do it, and so many other things from a life transitions aspect of things. You've
Yeah.
named them all almost today, right?
Uh-huh.
And I'm sure we could continue to talk for hours about many more.
Yeah.
And in this last year, so many folks have experienced those things too.
Yes.
What types of words of inspiration, as we kind of hit this middle year mark
Yeah.
of being halfway through the year, and maybe a few folks have set goals and they haven't achieved them yet and they're beating themselves up, or they haven't found that job, or they lost a relationship, or lost a loved one, or are battling with something, a sickness. What would you give as words of encouragement or inspiration to those individuals who need that reset button?
Oh man, there's so many things I want to say. I think the first thing that I want to say is that very plainly, and I hope this comes out the right way, without the bad in life, there could be no good, because they serve to define each other. And if we lived in a world where nothing bad ever happened, we would walk through life and all it would be is kind of a superficial acceptance of gifts that wouldn't have any meaning whatsoever. I don't think we would value them. I don't think we would appreciate them. And so that's just kind of thing number one. As hard as life can be sometimes, I think that the very first thing that it serves to do is to make you appreciate and be grateful for the things that you have in your life that are good. And there are two realities that can exist at the same time. Life can be crazy hard, and you can be feeling defeated and helpless and all of the words. But at the same time, you may have a family that loves you. You may have a roof over your head. You may have a little bit of money in the bank, and those things, that bad situation and the good things, they're both true. And I think that if you can step out of your head just for a minute and make some gratitude lists, that can help to kind of break you free of some of maybe the victimization that you're feeling, or the disempowerment that you may be feeling. It's just a way of shifting your perspective so that you can move into action and maybe be a little bit more constructive about your more negative situation and how to get through it, or how to resolve it, or whatever the action du jour needs to be. But I think first recognizing those good things, and the other thing that I would encourage people to do is to make a couple of lists. Go back through, sit down for however long it takes, but 15 minutes with a notebook, and first write down all of the things that you've done in your life that you're proud of, whether it's getting a particular job, or, overcoming an illness, or, taking care of your children well, or, it doesn't have to be big things, but if they're important to you, write them down if you're proud of them. And then on the second list, write down all of the hard things that you've been through, because that's the thing, you've gotten through them, and you have within you the patience, the perseverance, the determination, the sense of humor, the problem solving abilities, the all of these qualities you have ingrained in you that have gotten you through so much. And I think if you make those two lists and then look at them, I don't know if I can say badass, but I think you'll see the
sure you
badass
can.
that you actually are. And just know that about yourself, and know that whatever you may be going through right now, there are good things in your life, and you've got innately within you what you need to be able to get through this too.
Oh, such good words of wisdom, Mindy.
Mm.
I could talk to you for the whole day. I can't wait till
Can
I get
we
down
do
to
that? That would be
Texas.
awesome.
I can't wait to get down to Texas and visit.
Oh, yes,
See
please.
everybody. It feels like Texas and Minnesota this week because it's so hot.
I know. It's, yeah.
But thank you so much for joining us. Where can people hang out with you online? Of course, they can listen to your podcast. Give a little bit of information of where people can hang out.
Absolutely. So my website is mindyhendersonco.com. You can go there. You can send me messages there. You can sign up for my emails. You can find links to all of my social, but I'm on Instagram. I'm at Mindy Henderson Speaks. Facebook and LinkedIn, I'm just Mindy Henderson. And then my podcast, my personal podcast, you can find on all of the usual suspects, Spotify, Apple, all the things. It's called The Truth About Things That Suck. And the upcoming,
love that.
Thank you. The upcoming podcast, the MDA podcast, is going to be called Quest Podcast. And you can find that on the MDA website. It's part of the Quest family of content. They have a newsletter, they have a magazine, and now the podcast, all under the umbrella of Quest. So you can find it there.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Mindy. We'll have to have you back too, because I know there's some other things that you're working on that will.
I would love that. Thank you so much for having me. It was absolutely wonderful talking to you, and you're just one of my favorite people. So thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Yeah.